Okay, so hello everybody. We're starting a very powerful panel about project sponsorship and steering committee insights. So we have a couple of questions to discuss from the other side of project management. So we have always a project manager reporting to a steering committee, and any project should have a project sponsor who is dedicated and would benefit of having this project successful. So we will be discussing a few points from the other aspect. So we have a very knowledgeable and expert high-level top management who will show us and describe the other side. How do they see projects and what insights do they require, and reporting and information from project managers and so on. So hello everybody. We have Dr. Reinhard Wagner, we have Dr. Hossam, Farhat, Dr. Saadi, Adra, and Mr. Dharam. And I will leave the floor for them to introduce themselves and also to show us and explain what is their perspective and how they will be discussing from which point of view. So, Dr. Reinhard, would you please go ahead?
Yeah, hello. Here, I'm from Germany. I'm working mainly with industry. And in industry, they are doing mainly internal projects. So for sponsor, it's a very different perspective, as I think. So you build on a strategy, you have a business case, you have a product portfolio, and through projects, you implement that and hand over the deliverables to operations. So the sponsor is somehow in the sandwich from a time perspective, but also from an organizational perspective, because typically, he has project teams working on these items, but he's reporting also to the top management of an organization like Audi, car manufacturer, or Siemens, which are producing electrical equipment, as you know. So it's a very specific perspective that we see as a sponsor. And the sponsor's role is mainly to balance between all those perspectives and make something happen. That's my perspective.
So, as bottom line, so you mainly we are discussing from a sponsorship perspective from client side in manufacturing. So most projects would be internal projects.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. Dr. Saadi.
Okay. Good afternoon again. I'm happy to be part of this panel. I've been working for the past decade or more, mostly with the owner's side. Owner government side and oil and gas. So my experience is in organizational development, project management, portfolio program, and managing benefits as well, strategy implementation. And in this context, we're talking about the sponsor or the steering committee, because in the public sector, there is no one single sponsor. It's a sponsorship is something owned by a board or by a steering committee. Board is permanent, steering committee is temporary, initiated for a specific project or a program. Whereas in the oil and gas, it's more static because they have this integrated life cycle. They have these boards that supervise multiple investments through the whole life cycle, from conceptualization, addressing the feasibility, the business case, whether or not to approve it or not. Then they go to the other phases like detailed studies, they call it FEED in oil and gas. Similarly, they do design, and it could be it starts always with conceptual design, but goes into more detailed design. There is also some sort of tendering to select the right designers to work on some phases. Then it goes from that to the bidding, initiating an RFP, preparing for soliciting for proposals for approved bidders, until the actual physical investment. Probably if it is a 5 or 7 years whole life cycle from conceptualization to operation, we have so far at least 2 years passed by. And this is where the major investment, the major money is invested. And we have construction that commences with a lot of procurement, long lead items and whatnot, until we reach a phase where we have something concrete and they start to do pre-commissioning, then commissioning, until it goes to operation and reaches the needed capability and capacity. This is in a nutshell the life cycle within a mega or giga project for the oil and gas or the government sector. And sponsorship is about the committee that supervises the whole life cycle, whereby you find multiple projects, programs within a big portfolio. I think you are muted, Basel.
So thank you, Dr. Saadi. So Dr. Hossam, would you please share your context as well, and who are the main stakeholders you find?
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and hello again. The main reason behind my topic today is to express or to explain how it works in big infrastructure projects like we have here a very interesting case study in the new capital being built all over Egypt. Somehow, when you come to the stakeholder with complex projects like this, you cannot find easily one person who is capable of steering the whole project as a whole or overlooking the project as a whole. So what happens with the owner or the government that is contracting for the project is they hire specific engineering houses like consultants for every aspect of the project. So you can find for all the big commodities, you find a consultant who is overlooking the project execution, overlooking project time, plans, implementation, and things like this all over the cycle in such a way that he acts on behalf of the owner to make sure that the project is not delayed or is not stuck somewhere where things would stop. So this is the concept of having a sponsor. The project sponsor is not a person; it will be a group of consulting firms or consulting houses that are overlooking all the phases of the project throughout the project.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. So, Mr. Dharam, go ahead, please. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dharam Singh, and I am here in California. So I spent a lot of time in Australia. I think 22 years of my life was in Australia, Sydney, especially Sydney. So a lot of my examples are coming from my work when I was working as a project manager, program manager, portfolio manager, and I have spent some time on the other side as well, as a sponsor as well. So it's a pleasure to be here, and especially in the company of such a great panelist here. And I hope I can talk from the. I hope that we can give the value people came here for, and I will be covering from IT side because my experience is coming from IT, especially infrastructure, and also building website and application. So I will be talking from data center point of view. So just to give you context, I was responsible for setting up a cloud data center for HP at the Asia Pacific level. So that was a huge program coming from, actually it's a $30 million program, and from ground level with nothing, with the building up whole system. So that's something I will talk about. So I will also talk about my experience working for a government department for state government, New South Wales, where moving the data center, no, actually it was not data center, moving a computer room, which was very old, 25-year-old computer room, and moving to ultra-modern data centers, 2 data centers. And the reason was because they're too old, and they were having lots of problems, and there was a risk of losing data and the vital information. So I was working with the sponsor, and with the help of the sponsor, we identified the steering committee and tried to cover as many people as we can without making it too big. So we end up having 7 people on the steering committee, representation from data center, representation from network team, that representation from DBA team and all other, and also user group. So the purpose of this kind of steering committee is to make sure the project you're working on have the right support, and the people sitting as a steering committee member, they can look at the project or program from different angles, because we have sponsor, we have a representation from all the departments, and we have beneficiaries. So whenever you're presenting your status report, they will look your status from different angle. Whether, let's say you talk about a change request. A change request will impact not just
So steering committee is formulated from different functions, and they are a single point of contact from each of these major deliverables or departments, correct?
Yeah. So we need to have representation, whoever is going to get impacted positively, especially positive, negatively as well, and the beneficiaries who are going to benefit from your program. So they need to be there to check your program and give you direction, help you resolving your issues, help you resolving your risk, and also your change request. So
yes,
great
perfect.
to be here. Thank you.
Okay then. So let us focus more on the role of project sponsors. So from your perspectives, we are currently covering different industries. We have oil and gas, manufacturing, construction, and IT, and we have private and public sectors as well, from client and vendor side. So I guess they are all maybe the same. What do you think, Dr. Reinhard?
So in manufacturing industry, the sponsor is a single person, it's an individual, and typically very high-ranked individual, so business area lead or something like that. And so the responsibility of that person is to translate the business case, the business story, into tangible project objectives. So he's formulating the project charter for the project manager. And that's a very important one, because so he's translating the whole strategy of the business area into tangible project perspectives. He's also typically to select a project team lead or project management team to do that and fulfill that. And I think that's very critical, because he needs to select the right competence, also the right motivation of the team to support that project. And basically, he's also supporting the whole project management team throughout the whole project lifecycle to do the work. And that also may mean that he negotiates with the top management of that organization if there's any resources needed, maybe budget or any people for the project. When it comes to the authorities, that's also something very important. So typically the project sponsor, as he is a quite important manager at that organization, he's directing that project, so he's also involved in the decision making. And he is not the only one that can take that decision. He's bringing that to the steering committee, because typically there's the sponsors part of a steering committee with managers from all these business areas that have a stake in that project. So he typically is involved in the stage gate approval process, and also in the change request management, which is very important because it has implication on the timeline and also on the budget. Accountabilities, sure, at the end, on the long-term perspective, the sponsor is responsible for the business success. So the project needs to pay into that. So it's also spanning beyond the project lifecycle. That's very important bridge between the project management team and then the business. He's certainly also responsible and accountable for the economical success. So everything that's commercially important, but also stakeholder satisfaction. And that may mean so handing over a new product to the production, need to involve all those stakeholders in the very early stage of the process, but also top management. So he's somehow, as I said in the beginning, in the sandwich position and balance all these interests to make it successful in the end. What is the expectation towards the project manager? To help him to be successful in that sandwich position. So to fulfill all these accountabilities.
Okay, so Dr. Reinhard, you have one sponsor for the project, but at your side, Dr. Hossam and Dr. Saadi, we have multiple stakeholders. So I guess it's a bit challenging not having one person who would own the project and will be caring for having it successful and gaining the benefits, so on. So Dr. Saadi, how do you manage such situation?
Okay, thank you. Reinhard did an excellent job for stating many of the aspects or attributes or the roles the sponsor should do. And I believe many of these functions, we need them in all types of projects. Now, to speak specifically to address the needs of public sector projects, first thing, decision-making is not easy. In many cases, there is also the political dimension and also the social dimension. Plus, you don't have one decision maker, you have multiple decision makers. Hence, in order for a business case to float or be approved, the sponsor is a person, a champion within this steering committee or board who actually lobbies for the soliciting the agreement or the approvals of both the other stakeholders, the other decision makers in the government, and that would be from various ministries, authorities, and organizations, sometimes international fund and whatnot. And from the other side, looking for the social aspect. Does this society, the community, does it need a new city? Does it need a new way of transportation? Does it need more clean water, more power, and so on? So doing this lobbying would be a part of the sponsor, because in that sense, he would start to generate holistic approval for the project or for the investment, let's say, because they are concerned with investments within which there will be multiple projects. This is one aspect. Then, of course, whenever these sponsorship boards, okay, they operate, their focus is on realizing specific strategies or KPIs required by the government or the ministry or the board of the oil and gas companies according to their upcoming vision in the coming 3, 5, or 10 years. So they work on the selection with portfolio to select the best fit to address these strategic needs and strategic requirements, looking at multiple business cases. Then after that, or actually within all that, they are concerned with governance, because when we have too many players and multiple stakeholders and all will participate in decision making at various levels, then we need a good governance system. Otherwise, we'll start to step on each other's feet. This is one of their concerns. Then also they have a concern with balancing within the investment between business and usual or operation and the project. And they are geared by focusing on managing sustainable benefits that will still be there for the public to benefit from after the project or program manager goes away. And there are multiple other things, but the last two important thing is sourcing, whether it is fund, whether the utilities, experts, support from funders within the government or from outside, from public banks or funding organizations, development organizations, and of course, then the issue of actual management, which I believe Reinhard mentioned many valuable points about it, especially the point of who does what in terms of accountability and in terms of escalation. Whenever there is a change, can we have a solid system whereby we can have transparency, we can have proper accountability, fairness, but at the same time, some agility for the people on the ground to be able to carry on the work and do the needed success, and then revert back to this board for escalation on changes or additional need for power or for escalated risks or whatnot.
Okay then, thank you, Dr. Saadi. So Dr. Hossam, unlike what happens with Dr. Saadi's context, you have different agendas with your stakeholders. So we have many service providers who want to just deliver and leave, and others who would own and continue in operations. So what do you think? How would that project sponsor function here?
Well, the project sponsor is facing a huge challenge, especially in performing his role. Please bear in mind that those sponsors do not own the project, so they do not own the project yet. They should attain a sort of control over all the activities done by the project manager in an attempt to control the performance of the project management throughout the project. Well, actually, as we all know, the project sponsor does not have day-to-day activities to look after. What they do is have a holistic view of how the project is being performed. So they should have their own vision on what kind of future that the project will be facing. Also, they should have some sort of governance over the performance of the sub-suppliers, the subcontractors, the contractor, the project manager in such a way that we follow up properly and make sure that all the resources are available. Meanwhile, it should include all, take care of all the values and benefits. It's a value-benefit thing between the project manager, the sub-supplier, and also the other stakeholders, as Mr. Saadi, Dr. Saadi mentioned before, that they should be also responsible for having the funds available for whatever is needed to steer the project forward. I would also focus on what they do throughout the 4 phases of the project implementation. During the initiation, they should be responsible, in a sense, to choose which project managers they would be selecting to take care of the part that they are interested in, and of course make that project manager aware of what will be needed from him in particular. During the planning phase, they should be aware and have a perfect plan and make sure that this plan is realistic and doable within the time frame of the project, and most importantly, capable of resolving issues that may arise during the planning phase. During the implementation, I think the role of the project manager reduces so much, but his role is always to make sure that time, quality, and budget are on track, put milestones and follow up on those milestones to make sure that everyone is performing his job properly. Last but not least, during the closing, they should be initiating a mechanism for handing off and signing off the project. How would a sub-supplier or how would a subcontractor be accepted as finished products in such a way that they can move forward with other things? The most important role, I would always say that the project sponsor should have a good set of questions to ask all the time: when, what, and how, and what do we want to achieve.
Okay, insightful, Dr. Hossam. So, Mr. Dharam, I think things are a bit straightforward at your side. So, what would be the expectations for a project sponsor in the IT sector?
Yeah, so thank you. So this is the advantage of speaking last, because by this time you have already, everybody has covered everything. So you just have to say thank you and my job is done. So actually, a project sponsor role is very, very critical. First of all, the project sponsor has to have certain qualifications, or anybody can't be just because he's the director, he's the executive manager, and should be the sponsor. He or she has to have certain skills. So somebody who can influence the stakeholder. because you are running a mega program or project, and you're going to not only work with your project team, but also you're working with your senior managers, your CEO, director, on various other roles, sometimes public, sometimes media, everything you have to cover. So you have to be champion of the whole project. And guess what? When the project fails, who's next on the chopping board? It's a project sponsor. You're thinking that, oh, my role as a project manager, I get all the blames. You may get all the blames, but in front of senior managers, he or she has to face the big panel. They are asking tough questions. So he has to champion the whole project. And if the project is successful, of course, sponsor has done a good job. Yes, you can take some credit. So, but the sponsor has to make sure you have the required funding, you have the required support, and whatever change request or issues or risk you have raised, they have been taken care or resolved in a proper manner. So you can go to the sponsor with the I got a lesson from my working with a company when I was just started as a project manager. I used to go to my sponsor with all kind of problems. I'm telling my sponsor, this is the problem. I don't have resources. I don't have money, and this and that. So he used to ask me, Dharam, great. I'd like to know the problem, but I'd like to know your options. So the thing is that when you go to the sponsor or to the steering committee, you don't just go with the problem. You go with multiple options, where they and also provide them pros and cons of each of the options. So they can take the decision from their understanding. Because the problem is you are involved in day-to-day management of the project, they are not. So when you go to them with a problem, they like to see the context. And you're going to provide them context, and also you can say, look, this is the problem, but I have done some thinking, and according to me, these are the following solutions, possible solutions, but these are pros and cons. So please guide us from your point of view. So if you're presenting this to the steering committee, they will look at your problem from different angles. So they will look from the beneficiary point of view, they will look from the resource point of view, they will look from the impact point of view, and they look from various angles and then guide you, direct you on the right direction. So to me, this role, including the steering committee, is very, very critical, and having the right people on the board is really, really important.
So you mentioned a very critical point that we as project managers, we live in the project. So all problems we are already facing and we know everything about it. But other sponsors and steering committee, they just know a glimpse every now and then. So I always need to onboard them in a specific short way. I'm not just to throw the problem at them. I just need to go there after I do my exercise in assessing options and pros and cons for him to decide and I to give advice, correct?
Exactly. You have to do your homework. You have to make sure you understood the problem and you explain the problem in the shortest possible way, but creating a context around.
Exactly.
And possible solutions.
Yes. So Dr. Reinhard, do you see other aspect that you as a project sponsor would want to focus on what kind of KPIs you always want to hear? Because we get steering committees asking if everything okay, so bye. So no news is good news, but definitely this is not the case for projects. So what do you think?
I think the most important information I'd like to hear is whether the project is performing or if there's any problem, and as early as possible. So in the agile world, we speak about fail early because it's much better to have this kind of signal. So my expectation towards a project manager is to get as early as possible any signals if that's not working in that way. And that requires also the sponsor then to say stop. So to have a clear stop sign out and say, okay, let's analyze what's going on and what can we do? Because I think the biggest problem is that you continue working on the project. You know there's something not all right, but everybody is continuing to work. So I think that's very important to have a clear cut and say, okay, stop. And so this is also why it's important to have a good competence in the steering committee represented. You know all about the Berlin airport. It was a real failed project because in the steering committee, the mayor of Berlin, city of Berlin, was represented, and one of our prime ministers of the state of Brandenburg. But there was nobody who knows something about project management and the role of decision making in that context. And that was a big problem because they all said, hey, come on, it will continue, no problem. And so 3 weeks before opening, they need to stop that whole project. It was definitely too late. So this is why my advice would be, as a sponsor, take care that you have enough competence in your steering committee. So not only the politicians, but really people that know how to, let's say, steer or oversee projects and ask them for proper decision making. And on the other hand, again, the project manager needs to make that transparent as early as possible and force you or push you also a bit into action so that you can respond to it.
Yes, so fast response, transparency, in addition to the exercise to be done before reporting the whole problem. So Dr. Saadi, in such complicated context, what do you advise the project manager to do in the setup of reporting and handling issues?
Well, actually, I remembered, based on what we are all talking about, from another panel. We were conducting a discussion, and there was a panelist from, I believe, Siemens, and another one from maybe EY. And we came to a conclusion, but the sponsor is not qualified enough in many cases, meaning project manager knows how to manage a project because they've been working on this and gaining experience. They took courses, they implemented, they had mentorship, they had external consultants and engineers in some cases. And they learned a lot on how to manage the technicality of the project. But is there a certification or a school that can generate a sponsor? Is there a checklist for who is a good sponsor? And this woman, professional lady from EY, she said, let us train our sponsors as project managers. Now, it's not easy to train your sponsor, but to actually propose concepts and ideas to them might be a good start. Reinhard tapped on a very, very tough point, very important thing. Within the board, is there anybody who knows how things should go on? Who knows that in 3 months we will have a major milestone, that we should look for 1, 2, 3, 4, that the people downstairs, when they fail, did they fail because they don't have the competency, or did they fail because we cuffed their hands, because we do not know how to provide the right support for the project managers to succeed? And I believe this is the biggest problem faced by project managers. When you have a sponsor who does not know how to act as a sponsor, to do the role of the sponsor, and mind me, 80% of the reason of success comes from the sponsor, but as well, 80% of the reason of failure comes from the sponsor. Why? When you cuff the hands of the project manager, when you don't provide support, when you are too busy to listen to their escalations and needs, how in the world will the project succeed? Then the project fails, and what is the first thing they do? Point fingers to the poor project manager. And in many cases, they kick him out. Does this bring the project back on track? No. Does this solve anything? Perhaps the only thing is that we lost a good resource, okay? And he will go seek a better career elsewhere. Good for him, but not for the project, nor for the organization. So the challenge is big in terms of sponsoring. I believe we need a standard for the sponsor. And the sponsors, these people at the C level, they're not gonna attend a classroom. and they will not go for a certification exam. So what do? We have to provide coaching services for these sponsors. Okay, we have to get some external consultants, help them do what they should do right, and then things will be better for everybody. One last point. In one interview with my friend Badr Bourched, he was director for the PMO of Aramco. Now he's acting GM for one of their largest giga programs there. And we were talking about sponsorship. And I was amazed because in their mature environment, they do have a checklist for the sponsor. They do have training for the sponsor. They do have career planning for the sponsor. So nobody will be put upstairs in that board unless they know how to properly support their projects. So in the oil and gas sector, okay, I'm talking about Aramco, the most mature in the world, but other oil and gas organizations also have more or less some of these best practices. But when it comes to the government sector, in many cases, the people earn or inherit a position because of political reasons, not because of their knowledge or the knowledge they should have. So in this perspective, maybe I would take the advice of Reinhard and invite a consultant in sponsoring and for the executive level to work with this board and give them some coaching on what to do and what not to do. And this is something I believe very critical and very important.
Insightful, yes. But Dr. Hossam, how do you see a project manager functioning in such complicated context as well? Since I guess it would be definitely not that mature, same as Dr. Saadi mentioned in the oil and gas sector. So what do you think?
Well, actually, we have first to discuss, I would not repeat what Dr. Saadi said, but in our industry, the model is a little bit simpler. And there is not such a project-sponsored institute where we can train or advise the project sponsors. Me, as a project manager, I would see some challenges. The first challenge is that the project sponsor is being appointed before appointing me as a project manager. So he is preset. I don't know, sometimes they do not have the previous experience on this project in particular, and he is trying to fulfill. So he lacks knowledge, and sometimes he lacks authorities to help me with other entities, like other stakeholders, to move the project forward. If they don't have the authority, they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the experience, I will be, as a project manager, I will be in real trouble. Why? Because they will not be able to help me proceed with the project. So what should I do? That's the challenge. I can assume that the first thing we should do as project managers is try to implement managing upwards. Managing upward. That means that you manage the project sponsor. You try to put him in place where he can help you execute the project. I would see 4 points that are of most importance in this arena or this part. Number one, set the expectations. Set expectations for the project sponsor. Tell him, because you are more knowledgeable and you have more experience, tell him what kind of things that are expected and what are not expected. The most important thing is doing kickoff meetings. Kickoff meeting is very important, but it will not be a kickoff meeting. In parts, on milestones of the projects, you should again arrange for a kickoff meeting to say that this is what we are working on. Again, as I said this morning, communication is the real part of the thing. Communicate. And as I said before, wash, rinse, and re-communicate. Tell the people what the project sponsor. Speak to him and listen to him, most importantly, and in such a way that we can understand where he is coming from. Most importantly, keep the project sponsor involved, meaning that any person who is working on a project that does not feel he has an importance, then he will turn out to be hindering the project, hindering whatever you are doing. So if he feels that he is neglected, then he will try to see a way in such a way that I would like to be important, I would like to be informed, I would like to be involved. So it's better if you do it as a project manager to try to give him responsibilities in such a way that he is involved, everything is going, he is seeing, in such a way that he is now helping you as if you are managing him. So this returns back to the first assumption that you should manage upwards, especially when you have more experience and you have more knowledge about the project you are taking care of. I would give my fellow project managers three main recommendations. The first one, always review the relationship with your sponsor. Always review the relationship. Try to build it to be as much as possible uplifting the relationship between both of you. If you can find any training opportunity or any source of knowledge, please pass it over to your project sponsor. He will help you because he will be knowledgeable, involved, and he will help you. The most important thing, he wants to see the results, deliver results. Show him how and what you could achieve in terms of results for the project you are working on.
Yes. Insightful. So I guess having the value and incremental deliveries, this would definitely get the buy-in from sponsors and keep him engaged. So Mr. Dharam, how would you handle politics? Because this is the one thing that most of project managers hate. So having such context in IT, I guess it would be more, let's say, it would be more tangible because we have many spokes in a small project, or not a small project, but a very knowledgeable area. So how would you handle politics in such context?
Yeah, so I actually worked for a government department. IT is IT. You can be working in a private and government, and politics is there. We know there's the politics happening. There are we have head of departments, and they have to play from their department. They have to look after their interest, and the sponsor looking after from their whole project or organization interest. So first thing I like to suggest, that we have to acknowledge there's the politics going on, but how do you know this? You have to have some stakeholder understanding. So you need to know who are the people in your board, and spend some time with them, understand their concerns, their expectations. And many times we feel there's a politics going on. They're trying to blame me. They're trying to shame me. It's not always like that. It is sometimes you're not meeting their expectation. And how do I know what they're expecting from me? It is only by talking to them. So when you're starting a project, spend some time, do some interview, understand what they're expecting, how they're expecting, in what format they're expecting, and what's the frequency. What will make them happy or not happy. Understand that without putting saying that this is what I'm trying to do. But what you're trying to build is your understanding as well as your team's understanding. So when I'm teaching PGMP or PFMP, we talk about stakeholder identification and analyze the stakeholder and build this engagement plan. You need to build an engagement plan to see, okay, this person is like this, and this is how I'm going to work with this person. If this person needs information in this format, I will provide this information in this format. Many times problems happen because you don't know what the person is expecting from you. And if you have noted down and your team is aware of that, so you can be ready for that interaction or the team meeting. So that's what I think, that how can you minimize this noise or negative thoughts going around. And other thing is building and fostering the relationship. So it is like, when you start a new project, everybody excited, they want to see the results. But as you go, out of your honeymoon period, it's like, it's in a project, I bring like a marriage or you just met a new girl or boy, and you're excited. So everybody, you don't see the faults in the other person. You see the person is the greatest person. But as you go further and further, you start seeing not the good things about the person. You start thinking, okay, this is something missing. But what you can bring to the table, guys, we need to continue to build and fostering the relationship. So spend time, when in IT world, we do talk about having, Friday evening, drinks. I don't drink, by the way, and spending time going team building activities. So there's the importance to have, very important to have team, team building activities where you have sponsor, you have project manager, even team member. So they need to know each other. Okay, and that's not in a work environment. That has to be non-work environment. We're not talking about work. We're talking about the cricket. We're talking about the movies. We talk about something else. Why we need this? So we can break the barriers. So you know what he understands or she understands. They know your capabilities and how you're going to interact with them.
So Dr. Saadi, in order to close our panel, we have one last round. So Dr. Saadi, other than lobbying and drinking coffee, because here in Egypt we use coffee and cigarette, we don't use drinks. So what else would you recommend as a do and don'ts for a project manager to handle the project sponsors?
Well, actually, first of all, I love all the notes that my colleagues came up with. I believe we should have an alliance. The project manager, yes, they teach us the most important stakeholder is the client. But actually, to get the things done, you have to spend time with your sponsor. You have to understand his gaps or her gaps. You have to understand their communication needs. I'll tell you one trick. They all love dashboards. Colorful dashboards, because they can have in one shot they can see everything about, or many high-level details about the project. But make sure that this dashboard is realistic, because every now and then you are faced with a smart sponsor and he would like to click and find how did you get this number. So it should be a real number, not a fake number. Like many dashboards, they tell you what you like to hear. Okay, and what we want to have is to tell the truth, one version of the truth. We say it because this is the way to be bold enough, courageous enough to bring problems early and upfront to the sponsor. But as Dharam said, bring them with proposed solutions. Okay, and other than having this collaboration with the sponsor, providing the right performance, the right KPIs. Now, as you report to the sponsor, whether it is a person or a board, they also report to someone higher. So the more you help them, okay, follow their standards, and if they don't have proposed something, work with them, okay, try to make them your ally, not your enemy. The minute you have a conflict, a big conflict between the sponsor and the project manager, the project will definitely be affected. It will only succeed. They say it takes two to tango. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, you have to be two, not one. It's not sole playing in project management. It's all about collaboration.
Exactly, yes. But Dr. Reinhard, we have the same situation, but as you know, internally, once we get a review, every spot comes here to the presentation. Please make this green, not red. Please change this color. So the review would be as easy as possible. So what advice do you give to project managers in internal projects?
I build on what my colleagues have said. I think communication. That's the key part. And I would split it into a formal part of communication, which is those dashboards and those tangible kind of information. But if you look closer, it's not that tangible because it's put into some nice colors or numbers or whatever. And it is an interpretation of the project management team saying, okay, it is green or yellow or red. So I think from a sponsor's perspective, it's also good to get some informal communication. And that's in Bavaria. Typically, we love beer drinking. So that means to have a setting where you can also speak to your sponsor in a more informal sense and speak about the numbers in between, the information between the lines, because not everything is so clear or exact to put it into numbers. So both parts, I think, are very much important. And help also the sponsor to understand what does it mean. What is the consequence of that information? Because as also my colleague said, not every sponsor is in the picture. He's on a different level, more strategic level of thinking. So from presentation, it's very important to show alternative options to deal with it, to tackle a certain situation, and also show the sponsor what happens if nothing happens. Because that's often the problem, that there's no decision, but clock is ticking. So like in this forum now, so it means that the sponsor needs to know there's no decision now that has consequences for the whole project and the business case. So communication.
Can you allow me, Basel, to step in? Because when Reinhard said that, I remembered we had a sponsor on a Giga government project in the Gulf. And that sponsor was really smart. So after we developed the dashboard and all 450 projects had these colorful green, red, yellow, blue KPIs, and he started to look and he knew that this is not realistic. Okay, so it's too much green. Then he asked for something more. Okay, he said, I want either to install a live camera on every site and a camera that I can control and zoom, or you have to attach pictures with date on every milestone. Now, suddenly, when we spoke that to the construction supervision and they spoke to various contractors, okay, and they started to upload the pictures, they had to change their numbers. And suddenly, lots of the green became yellow and red, because now he put green and he sees a disaster in the picture on the ground. You cannot lie anymore. Okay, so this is one aspect of communication resolved in this case.
It's a great advice that project managers should always be bold, transparent, and never manipulate data, because we have it's always obvious we have too many green and things are not that smooth. So yeah, agree definitely. So Mr. Dharam, we have one question from the audience. He is mentioning that can we say that the project sponsor is a strategic project manager and the focus on sponsor is to ensure project delivery and satisfaction to all stakeholders? And since he has more authority, what do you think?
So you're saying the question is if the project sponsor is the most strategic project manager. So yeah, so in a way, a sponsor is also a project manager, because what you're managing at the project level, they are managing at the higher level. And knowledge about your project and knowledge about the stakeholders around, knowledge about what to communicate, what not to communicate, and how to realize the benefit. And if there's a negative benefit, how to smooth, without impacting too much. Let's say if a particular project is bringing some negativity around because of the people losing job, you need the sponsor has to deal with that as well. You need to bring some smoothness so that people losing job. But what else we are doing to make sure they are communicated and they have been taken care as well. So in a way, yes, a strategic project manager in the senior managers, should the sponsor do a PMP training, the PMP certificate? Maybe it's a good idea, because now they can understand from the project point of view.
Yeah, okay.
Allow me to step in here because I believe it's a very thin line. Dharam is right. In a way, a sponsor is kind of a project director, we would say in English. But on the other hand, we need to be very careful not to step too much on the toes of a project manager, because a project manager is in charge of the project and the delivery and so on. So if a sponsor is too much taking over the space of the project manager, this one would withdraw, and so at the end, nobody's responsible for the delivery. So I think it's a thin line. We need to be very careful.
And we also have the project management office
Yes.
head. So also from another perspective, there are responsibilities divided into both. Yeah. Thank you.
Basel, may I jump in here, because I found a very interesting question coming from Ahmed Mohammed. He's asking, what is the relationship, or is the sponsor a manager for the project manager? I can see that if you look exactly in the hierarchy, you can see that the project sponsor is higher in the hierarchy than the project manager, in such a way that he overlooks all the activities going on in the project. Eventually, being there, he is responsible in front of the other stakeholders to make sure that the project will be delivered on time and on costs. So that means that, well, he is having higher authorities, but he's having higher responsibilities. And in this case, he should address also, we as project managers should address that we try to help him get what he wants. It's like a boss-subordinate relationship. You want him to succeed in such a way that you also should succeed.
Yes, perfect. So our last question from Ahmed Mukhtar, Dr. Saadi, I guess you will be able to relate easier, since it's related a bit to the APPMG managing benefits. So Ahmed Mukhtar is asking, what could you do as a project manager when an internal project, the project sponsor is not powerful enough to empower the project with enough internal priority and resources?
Okay. My advice, don't waste your time in a battle that you can never win. Meaning, if the sponsor is weak, and if the project is not a strategic project for your organization, I don't say walk away, but do the best of what you can in this context or situation. It's like you are a lawyer and you are defending a criminal, not because you love the criminal or you love crime, because in the legal system, even the criminal is allowed to have a lawyer, okay, to make his judgment like in shorter terms or whatnot. So even if you are managing this project and this project might not be that successful, then my job, if it is not to make it succeed, is to minimize the impact of failure and do the best in the situation you are in. As fast as possible, try to ally to the sponsor and to see where the sponsor needs help. If he's not a powerful sponsor, there is a side, and this side, he might be more modest and more susceptible to collaborating with you as a project manager. Maybe you can give him some strength, give him some facilitation or directions on what to ask for, what to look for, do an alliance together and do the best you can. In real life, things are not like we teach in books.
Great. So I guess that there are a couple of questions that popped up. For 1 minute, I will read them. So Winston is asking, would it not be a great idea to have a portfolio manager type individual on steering committees at all times?
I have answered that one in the comment sheet. So I believe that the steering committee should be organized and should be, let's say, facilitated by someone from the PMO, typically the head of the PMO. But the PMO is not a decision function. That's very clear. So all the, let's say, the business decision should be in the steering committee manager. That's the level -1 of the C-suite or even the C-suite. So the PMO is advising, but not taking the decision. It's a very clear governance principle. And if you look for the ISO standard 21505, it's in governance of projects, programs, and portfolios. It's a clear separation between management and the steering.
So PMO and portfolio would be within the steering committee, but he's not a decision maker or a sole. It cannot be a sponsor, correct?
Yes, I would clearly separate those roles. A PMO is a support function, collecting all the information, aggregating it to, let's say, portfolio dashboards, and making proposals to the steering committee. Can facilitate the steering committee so that at the end you have a clear decision and an outcome, but it's not one of the decision makers in that steering committee. It would be a mix of authorities or accountabilities.
Okay, so I guess our time is up. So I would like to thank you so much for your insights and your knowledge, because definitely many attendees have been had the benefits of, and thank you for your time. So thank you so much, Dr. Reinhard, Mr. Dharam, Dr. Hossam, Dr. Saadi, and looking forward for further cooperation together.
Thank you. And good luck to
Thank you,
all.
Basel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Good luck. Bye.
Take care. Bye bye for now.